بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah. Hayya ala salah. Hayya ala falah. Hayya ala falah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The first verse is from chapter 3, verse 103. وَلْتَكُنْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون. And from among you there should be a party who invite to good and enjoin the right and forbid the wrong, and these are they who are successful. The next verse is chapter 5, verse 104. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ تَعَالَوْا إِلَى مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ وَإِلَى الرَّسُولِ قَالُوا حَسْبُنَا مَا وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا أَوَلَوْ كَانَ آباؤهم لا يعلمون شيئا ولا يهتدون. And when it is said to them, come to that which Allah has revealed and to the messenger, they say, sufficient for us is that wherein we found our fathers. What? Even though their fathers knew nothing and had no guidance? these verses of the Holy Quran came to mind yesterday when I was, as you may know, we have broadcasts, the Dabbarul Quran and reflections on the Holy Quran. And when I was looking at Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 102, these verses came to mind. Those verses of Al-Baqarah relate some allegations about Hazrat Sulaiman, salam, the Prophet Solomon, and the fact that he knew magic and he used to use that magic to control human beings and other people and so on and so forth. And in Babel, which was the capital, there is a well where two angels, they were sent to earth by Allah, and they were punished for their disobedience, and they were hanging upside down and teaching people magic and all this kind of thing. And in relation to a part of this verse, 102 of Al-Baqarah, I was looking at Tafsir Ibn Kathir, a commentary of the Holy Quran by Imam Ibn Kathir. And I was amazed that he spends about, 10, 20 pages on just that part of the verse of the Holy Quran. And I was amazed by two things. First of all, he relates what normally people believe. That there are people who know some sort of magic incantation, and if you pay them, they tell you what it is, and you go and recite it and blow on your enemy, and your enemy will die, or if your wife has left you, and if you repeat that incantation, then she will come back to you, and etc. And you find advertisements on television channels, in newspapers, ring this number of Baba so and so and tell him what your problem is, and he will tell you the incantation, he will give you a taweez, and that will sort out, the amulet will sort out all your problems by its magical powers. And these are all based on what I read in this commentary of the Holy Quran by Imam Ibn Kathir Rahmatullah Alayh. Now, the interesting thing that I found was that Imam Sahib says that there is no basis. And then he carries on and describes incidents. And I found it very puzzling that if there is no basis about hadith, he says there is no authentic hadith of the Holy Prophet that talks about, magic and magical powers and all this kind of thing. And then he describes various fantastic hadith, fables, stories, tales, where people are in Medina or Makkah, and they get on a dog, and in one blink of the eye, they're transported to Iraq and all this kind of thing. And I found it amazing that although Imam Sahib repeatedly says that these are all unreliable, he then repeats them. And I looked at the commentary by Hazrat Maulana Muhammad Ali, and Hazrat Maulana Muhammad Ali makes a very interesting point. He says that this verse actually refutes those allegations against Solomon and so on. And he says these are all a part of Jewish tradition, that Solomon had some wives who didn't follow his faith, and they demanded he built them a temple with idols so they could carry out their worship and sacrifices and so on. And Solomon did that, and he went there and all this kind of thing. And Hazrat Maulana says that this verse refutes all of that. And yet people have turned it into sort of supporting magical and fantastic things and so on. And this is why I recited the first verse that I did, and that is that there should be a people, an organized group, an organization that, as it says, and enjoin the right and forbid the wrong. These stories, this belief in magic and all these things, this is against Islam. But then this is not the only thing that this is not the only belief where Muslim thought needed reform. The list is a long one. And unless we reform, we'll be left behind other nations and other people. I mean, to give you one example, the British arrived in India. At that time, Muslims ruled India. And Muslims lost power to the British. And British opened schools where English was taught and education was in English and so on. And Muslims refused to go to those schools. Their religious leaders declared that it was heretical to go to those schools. And this is like the second part of the second verse that I recited. Sufficient for us is that wherein we found our fathers, even they didn't know anything, even when they didn't know anything. And what happened? It was 100 years before Sir Syed built a school for Muslims where they were taught English and Western subjects and so on. And for his efforts, he was called a heretic, or this or that, and so on. But then that attitude has continued. For example, where women are concerned, it is generally thought in the non-Ahmadi world that husbands are allowed to beat their wives. It is generally thought that women don't need to do anything. They just, sit around all day long, and it's the husband's job to earn a living and run the household. And we can see the results of this incorrect and narrow-minded thinking all around us in this country. For a long time now, unless both husband and wife worked, they could not pull on with all the payments. But whereas ladies of other religions, they go out to work and they support their husbands. Muslim ladies, they do not do that, especially when they come from some Muslim majority country. They say, God has said it's your job to provide, why should I do anything? And the result is that they're unable to buy a house. They live as tenants all their lives. And Economically, Muslims are falling further and further behind other communities that came to the UK at the same time, such as Hindus and Sikhs and so on. But then again, when you mention this to them, and they say, as I said, well, our fathers never did this. My mother and grandmother never went out to work. It's un-Islamic for women to go out and work. They're supposed to stay at home. And small things like the fact that even after the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had declared that he was a prophet, his wife, Hazrat Khatija, continued to work. She ran a business and she supported her husband. So, here is the example of the Prophet of Islam to us, that whereas he did missionary work, his duties as a prophet, it was his wife's business that supported these activities and the community. There's a lot of the people who embraced Islam were poor. They were slaves. And this applies to a whole load of things. Death of Jesus, return of Jesus, concept of jihad, rights of women, rights of minorities, and so on and so forth. It's a long list where we need to reform our thinking. We talk about the golden age of Islam. But at that time, Muslims were advanced in their thinking and their actions compared to other people. Europe experienced, it's called Dark Ages, exactly for the same reason that this is now a dark age for Muslims. Exactly the same reason. Women were not allowed to go out. It was only husband who could work and earn a living. Women weren't allowed into universities for education. About minorities, I was looking at the photograph of the first Black American who was given a place at a university. The whole class sat inside the lecture theatre or the lecture room, and he was sitting in the doorway. He wasn't actually allowed in the class to sit with those white Americans. Now compare that with our attitude in Muslim majority countries towards the minorities. Is it any different? I don't think so. It's very similar. We come to the West and we demand our rights, which is correct. But the rights that we demand for ourselves in the West, why is it that we are not prepared to give the same rights to the minorities in those countries where we are in a majority and we form the governments and so on? There must be a reason. The reason is that we need reform. Our minds, our thinking, it is stuck 800-900 years ago. Talking about minorities, we talk about Islam's golden age, and we talk about universities that were open in Baghdad and other places where the science and philosophy of Greeks and Romans was translated into Arabic, and thus all that knowledge was preserved. It was wonderful. But what most people don't point out is the fact that a lot of people working in those what were called Darul Hikmah, a house of wisdom, they were actually non-Muslims who worked there and who, in collaboration with Muslims who did these translations and research, etc. We sort of pretend as if they contributed nothing. Hazrat Umar, when Muslims conquered large areas, Muslims are few in numbers compared to non-Muslims. How were they going to run these countries? Hazrat Umar was asked, we don't have enough people. How should we? What should we do? And Hazrat Umar replied that only remove a person from his job if he's not doing it honestly. He didn't say if he's not a Muslim. He didn't say if he's a Sunni or a Shia. He didn't say if it's a Jew or a Christian or a Parsi, remove them. No. The only criterion was, is he doing his job honestly? Is that the criterion we use? No, we don't. In Muslim majority, in Sunni majority countries, Shias are persecuted. They can't get jobs. If they get jobs, they can't get promotion, and so on. We proudly, after 70 years, announced, I think the first Hindu or Sikh soldier had been conscripted into the Pakistan army. And why weren't we doing it all the time? Aren't these the rights that we're demanding for ourselves in the West? And people who behave in this way, that, they are, I can't find a polite word to describe such behavior. People who have double standards, let's say, that's the politest way that I can find to express this. They have double standards. In countries, let me ask you, is the Quran in Muslim majority countries different to the Quran in UK and Germany and France and America and so on? If it's the same Quran, if it's the same message, then why is the behavior of our brothers in Muslim majority countries so different to that in the West? And the reason is that we need to reform. We need to reform our thinking. We need to reform our behavior. And this is why Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad came. His instructions to Dr. Mirza Yaqub Bey, who just qualified from medical school and he wanted to start his practice. And he went to the Promised Messiah to ask him for guidance about how he should run his practice. And what wonderful reply did Hazrat Sahib give? That when a patient is sitting in front of you, the thought whether he is a Hindu or a Muslim or a Sikh or what sect he belongs to should not enter your head. You should give thanks to Allah that He has put in your hands the skill with which you can relieve a human being's pain. So that should be your only thought. How can I best help this person? and not whether he's a Hindu or a Sikh or what religion or what sect or whatever. And it was because the early companions of the Holy Prophet Muhammad treated others in this way that Islam spread. That people could see that whereas others were exploiting them and treating them as second-class citizens, here is one religion, here are one people who treated them as their equal. And unless we reform our thinking and our actions to go back, nothing will change. And this is why God repeatedly sends reformers to guide us back to the original path of Islam. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Qur'anil azim wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim innahu ta'ala jawadun kareebun malikun ar-raufur rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma ansur man nasara deen Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam waj'alna minhum waqsul man khazala deen Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa la taj'alna minhum ibadallah rahmakumullah innallaha ya'muru bil adli wal ihsani wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi ya'izukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. Uzkurullaha yazkurkum wad'uhu yastajib lakum wa la dhikrullahi akbar wallahu ya'lamu ma tasna'un.
Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, hayya salah, hayya salah, qad qamatis salah. Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah.
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Ihdinas siratal mustaqim Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amin. Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab ma aghna anhu maluhu wa ma kasab sayasla naran zata lahab وامرأته حمالة الحطب في جيدها hablum min masad. Allahu Akbar. Sami Allahu liman hamida.
Rabbana.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amin. Qul huwallahu ahad. Allahu samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Allahu Akbar. Sami Allahu liman hamida.
Rabbana.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Astaghfirullah. Rabbana atina Tabarak. Thank you for joining us for our Friday service. Tomorrow we are broadcasting on Pure Discussions, which is a WhatsApp app group. And then we go back to our normal broadcasts next week. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, goodbye.